Truii Conversations, giving the environment a voice. Truii would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands across Australia, and we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging.
Welcome to Truii Conversations. Today we're talking to Nick Marsh from Truii, the founder and managing director of Truii. Nick, lovely to see you online. How are you there in Tassie? Freezing?
It's freezing. No, it's lovely. Tasmania is always lovely. Just got to embrace the cold.
And the beautiful environment down there.
It's totally outstanding. So after our conversation, I'm going to get outside and get on another bushwalk.
We should add here, you're usually a Queenslander, but you're in Tassie at the moment.
Just making the most of it. Yep.
Hi, Nick.
Hi, Dave.
So, Nick, just to kick off, can we get you to tell us about tell us and the listeners about yourself and your role in the natural capital sector?
Sure. So it's kind of been a long journey, I guess. So 30 odd years in this sector, from consulting to government work to academia and time in CSIRO. And then in our world in Truii, building environmental modelling reporting applications to support sort of natural resource management related activities. And typically those things have been kind of single focused as our government clients, are focused on a water issue or a water quality issue or a biodiversity issue. And so out of all those learnings of the individual parts of natural capital, so Truii's built out this natural capital suite, effectively pulling all those pieces together to get the collected view across all those kind of single issues and to what we might collectively think of as natural capital. So it's been a kind of a 30-year journey as an academic, and then finding a love for software and ultimately trying to bring sort of best available science to bear for those who manage our natural resources.
What led you on the journey? What was it that you could see from, coming from that, from your background to kind of see the need for these software solutions?
I think it's probably the engineering and science background. So we see this relatively kind of vague notion of what natural capital is, and it meant a lot to me kind of personally, but then as a scientist and engineer, I want to be able to quantify that and to be able to, consistently represent what this thing means so that others can kind of participate in the natural capital kind of arena, really. So it's have consistency about what we talk about and what it means and what the value of these things are. Effectively trying to give the environment a currency, so that it makes kind of investment in and engaging in sort of nature positive related work have lower transaction costs, effectively. I guess simpler to engage in this game because we're all using the same type of language.
Yeah, but I also think, Nick, in terms of yourself and your experience and Truii, that we talked to Mike Buren from AgForce, and he was saying how important it is to be at the table with, landholders and government so you can understand their perspective and where they're coming from, because we all have different perspectives. And I guess you're 10 years working in the Paddock to Reef program. Do you think that sort of helped you come to that realization about it's not about a single issue, would you say?
Yeah, totally, Dave. So Truii's work with the Queensland and federal government over their collective reef water quality monitoring program, being able to model and predict the outcomes of water quality outcomes of all the amazing stuff that goes on within reef catchments, and then ultimately report that. And it's a great program and a really science-driven program. This doesn't have to be just about water quality. It doesn't have to be just about the reef. So, from the learnings that we've got there, can we take that style of model and make that apply more broadly? And it wasn't just a science. So that program that engages with, ultimately all this stuff happens on the ground with landholders. So we've got to kind of interact with the whole kind of value chain, I guess, from the landholders on the ground, the government and the regulators, corporate entities engaged in this process. Well, it's a model that can apply elsewhere. And that kind of tipped us over the edge with going, okay, well, the government's not going to fund this natural capital thing. How about Truii do it? Put together all the bits we've learned along the way, and we've seen how this program works. let's try and apply this, make this available more broadly.
And do you think, have you seen over the 10 years that the sort of conversation has changed and become a bit more mature around, talking about just beyond water quality, which that program has been focused on to think about, the co-benefits, the natural capital concepts of, that's the motivation for these podcasts, obviously. But have you seen a shift there, do you think?
Totally seen a shift in that. And even prior to that shift, this engagement with having a consistent way to quantify the benefit of what you're doing.
Yep.
It's subtly kind of totally reorganized the way that investment works in the reef. So effectively, there's a currency around water quality and being able to demonstrate the likely benefits you're going to have before you get funded. It means there's much lower transaction costs about getting investment on the ground, but it also means that the investment you do have on the ground, you've got a much higher confidence it's going to have real and valuable outcomes. And then from that work, we were sort of supporting the investors to think about not just water quality, but also to be able to quantify what we term co-benefits along the side. So all these other things that make up natural capital, the biodiversity and the social First Nations outcomes of that work as well, and implemented that in some of our reporting work around the reef. And now we see that being reflected back in new grants that come out. So it's about being able to demonstrate the water quality benefits, but also we want you to quantify the co-benefits associated with that. So it helps prioritize where that investment goes. So, we're subtly having an influence, I'd like to think, on the broader thinking about, the broader value of these projects, not just a water quality gain, but there are a whole lot of other benefits that come out of them as well.
And there's a sort of lot of players, a lot of people that you mentioned there, that the issue of scale, is there sort of, do you think one tool can sort of fit all, or what have you learned out of that side of it?
This is a total problem with understanding the natural environment. So it's always a question of scale, both temporal and spatial is really the issue. And so it's a bit of a leading question there from Dave, because his modelling background as well. It's always a problem we face. So we want to know about things precisely at the paddock scale, but we want to be able to plan at a regional and state level, and those things. It's really hard to pass from one spatial scale to another, and temporal scale as well. We want outcomes in the next 5 years, or do we want 30-year outcomes? And we've dealt with this in the natural capital suite space, really with a series of different products that operate at different spatial and temporal scales to hit different parts of the value chain, if you like.
That's an ongoing challenge in natural capital, isn't it? Is having that common language as well. The common denominator for how we measure it and how we're going to express it.
This is the key challenge, I think, at the moment in natural capital, is about coming up with that currency, having some consistent language, so that we don't spend 80% of our time talking about interpreting what we mean by these things. So we've got a base kind of currency, and it means the conversation moves on much faster. And that's what we've invested most of our energy into around the natural capital. It's about coming up with consistent metrics. So even though we spoke about doing things at different spatial or temporal scales, we communicate and report all those things using the same kind of base level of measures, so that there's a consistent currency for these things.
Yeah. And just take a step back. I'm interested to know how you define and describe natural capital and what it means to you.
Well, you've heard the dictionary definitions of what it is, the different components, but I think a whole lot more simply than that. I guess it's all the things that we care about that nature provides, and it's as simple as that. And we care about clean air, and care about clean water and soil to grow our crops. We care, as it turns out, about a stable climate, and we're doing a whole bunch of things around, reducing our emissions now. That's just kind of one of the components of the collective things that nature provides. We care about vibrant regional communities, and we care about First Nations' ability to connect with country. All of those collective things. So it's effectively the stuff the earth gives us that we like. So far, we've gotten away pretty well, because we've been able to consume those resources, but the the environment gets degraded, and ultimately those resources, don't continue to we fail to have a free lunch. And we've seen that with climate change, and we see it again with the broader environmental consequences of what goes on.
Yeah. Can I just ask, because I'm interested myself, but 30 years at this, what is it that drives you personally to keep, sort of really driving this whole area forward? It's a big challenge, isn't it?
I'd like to have a really prosaic answer to that, but I really love hanging out in the bush. So it's as simple as that. I just really love being in nature and with nature and looking at that, effectively 4 billion years worth of evolution has created this amazing thing that we're kind of part of. And I enjoy being part of that, and want to do my bit, if that makes sense, to let my kids and their kids sort of get the same joy out of it that I get out of it.
What do you see as the greatest challenge the industry faces, Nick, in terms of natural capital?
I think that the short-term challenge at the moment, what is it? It's really about credibility. So you'll see, even in the carbon industry. So we've got about 30 odd different methods of trying to quantify the value of carbon or carbon sequestration. A couple of those methods, there was some shade thrown on them about the rigor of the science, and that kind of throws shade across the collective, carbon reporting. And I think that we face in the immediate challenge, and the one that we're dealing with in Truii world, it's about making sure the science is as solid and as robust as you can to maintain that credibility in being able to represent the value of natural capital. That's the key thing for me in the short term, and even that in the longer term, science will prevail, and the methods will, be bedded down and become stable. But we just don't want to go through that kind of short-term dip of, having too much argument about credibility and the like. You're going to keep the science, front and center and focus on that, and if we don't have the science to support these things, maybe we shouldn't be representing it. What we should represent is the things that we can do with confidence and make sure the industry's got confidence in what we do.
So I've got a question for you. You could be seen as a challenge and opportunity, but the whole monitoring versus modelling thing, I mean, we're both from a science background and see the importance of measuring and monitoring, and also from my perspective as a modeller, I value modelling. But you got thoughts on that? You got views on that?
So that I have very strong views on this. We've absolutely got to measure these things. We've got to measure them. It's the fundamental that underpins the science to be able to understand, pattern and process, and then be able to predict. And then the role of modelling is to interpret that measured data to come up with ways to generalise those results, apply it more broadly. And in Truii world, we apply this modelling approach. Effectively, it's filling in the gaps where things aren't measured. One of the difficulties in this, in the current iteration of how we demonstrate natural capital, we see landholders kind of being forced to be scientists, being forced to monitor things, to measure things in the field. And so with a background in environmental science and measuring natural systems, it's really, really hard to measure the natural environment. It's a really strong discipline. You've got to have strong statistical power, good experimental design to be able to measure this stuff well. So one of the concerns I see is we push back on farmers, spend a lot of time and energy for them to try and measure stuff in an area that they're not the experts in. So this emphasis on measurement, I reckon you leave the measurement to the experts by and large, and let them do that well. Measuring natural things is really hard. There's so many things complicated that are involved here. You spend most of your time measuring the weather, and what you're trying to do is tease out, the environmental perturbations over and above the weather. It's a non-trivial task.
And as you say, I think the risk there is if we make it too difficult for farmers, they'll just, they'll back away. They've got enough on their plate now. And, I agree.
And it goes back to the credibility of the methods. So if there's the methods that says I've got to go and measure some environmental parameter over a short period of time, a year or a couple of years. Some of these things, they take tens of years, interdecadal, to respond, and you don't see an immediate response. You go, oh, well, what's that all worth? Just because, this things vary enormously through space and time in environmental systems, and measuring them is a non-trivial task. So I think we want to be careful about what we ask people to measure, but we absolutely want to measure, and we want to design that measurement process well.
Mm. Where do you see the greatest opportunity for the natural capital industry sector?
I reckon the biggest opportunity is in consumers, shareholders, I think is what's totally driving this industry and will increasingly drive this industry. So in the past, we've kind of been driven by government regulation, and we've sort of changed our ways to meet those. So these days, 69 of the 100 largest economies of the world are not countries, they're corporations. And those corporations are not responding, well, they're responding to government regulations, they're making sure that they play within the rules, but they're responding first and foremost to their shareholders. I can go and buy carbon-free beef at the supermarket. It's not because the government's forcing the supermarket to do that, but it's because the consumers demand, product that's come from good land custodians and are produced in sound ways. And I think that's really going to escalate what's going on in this industry. The motivation and you see our targets being set at government levels. We're arguing about what's going to happen by 2050. The corporations, they're setting 2030 carbon neutral targets, and that's got to happen, and somehow that influences the entire supply chain down to the landholder, and the way that they need to change their practices to be able to have access to those markets. And ultimately, that's all driven by the end consumers, the shareholders. When you tick that ethical investment box on your superannuation fund, that gets attached to a tranche of money that goes to a bank to loan to farmers for green loans, and that farmer's got to demonstrate that they're good land custodians. So effectively, the consumer's providing the value chain here to ultimately finance and reward good land custodians.
Mm. And there's no turning this, momentum around, is there? This ocean line is headed. People are demanding, shareholders, consumers, want to see the environment. They want to know that the environment's looked after. They're looking for these products. I mean, we just have to keep up and form the, sort of create the vehicle to make it work, really.
Totally. And then it gets back to that earlier point about credibility. You've got to maintain the credibility, got to maintain confidence for the consumers that they've got in the system, so that when they're buying a natural capital neutral product, they know that they're going to get that product.
The growth is happening, the direction is happening, and it's now a matter of the development of the industry around it, which is rapidly happening.
Totally. And it's great to be part of. It's really fun to see things move along. So within a career, it's really great to see how much has changed and how rapidly and the rate of change is really moving along. It's great to be part of.
Where would you like to see it all in 5 years, Nick?
It's a marketplace like every other marketplace, so it's easy to transact and invest in nature positive outcomes. Everyone knows what the metrics are. Think about what's an analogy here? Think about trying to plan a holiday 25 years ago, pre-internet. Complicated, lots of transaction costs. You've got to find someone who knows someone. That's kind of where we're at in the natural capital world. Think about booking a holiday now. You're online. You know what the currency is. Pick a spot on Airbnb and highlight the things you care about. In natural capital world, I care about biodiversity and First Nations outcomes and water quality. Now, select me the range of opportunities and landholders that I can engage in to do those things. So that's what I'd love to see in 5 years' time, to have, a marketplace where all those transaction costs kind of go away. We've got, a much more efficient way to effectively get money on the ground. And ultimately, the goal there is to grow the pie of money that gets spent for for environmental outcomes.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? To imagine that that's where it will get to, and that's kind of where everybody's headed, right? That's what we're aiming for.
Even a few years ago, that would have seemed like a crazy, rainbow unicorn thing to say, but it's totally tractable. I can see the move in that direction. It's fun to be part of that process. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. It's been amazing to hear that journey and sort of to really understand as well, ultimately where we're headed with this, where this is going and how it will operate and what it will look like to the producers and the people that are using it to quantify natural capital as part of their business. That's kind of for people who, I love your analogy of what it was like to book travel pre-internet. We forget how complicated things were, and now if you went back, you wouldn't believe did we ever do it this way? And I guess that's what we're looking for, right?
Yeah. In 5 years' time, we won't be having these conversations because this will just be part of the way that business gets done. It's part of the way that we manage the land, and we'll forget that we ever did it any other way. That's where we want to be.
Make business a lot simpler.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, thanks, Nick. Enjoy Tassie and the beautiful natural environment down there.
I will. I can't wait. Bushwalking. Let's go.
Yeah. Thanks, Nick.
Going to keep my eye out, see if I can't see that Tasmanian devil.
Yeah. Get into those scallop pies.
Totally.
Thanks, Nick.
Thanks.
Bye.
Truii Conversations is brought to you by Truii. We create data-driven web applications that give the environment a voice. I'm Nick Marsh, co-founder of Truii, and I really hope that you've enjoyed today's conversation. Thank you very much for being here with us, and I look forward to seeing you next time.